Good evening. I'm Charlotte Cummins, Director of Education and Programs. On behalf of MMoCA staff and Board of Trustees, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the live discussion with Patrick Martinez. The exhibition, Patrick Martinez, Sign of the Times, is on view until May 2nd in our new installation space named The Shop. Thank you to our members, supporters, community partners, and corporate sponsors. And now on to tonight's event. I am delighted to introduce you to Elizabeth Shoshany Anderson. Shoshany Anderson is Assistant Curator at the Madison Museum of Contemporary Art and the Lead Curator of Arts and Literature Laboratory, a community-driven contemporary nonprofit arts organization. Before joining MMoCA in the summer of 2019, Shoshany Anderson was curator of exhibitions and collections at the Miller Art Museum in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin. Shoshany Anderson was previously based in London, where she held a curatorial internship at the Tate Modern. Shoshany Anderson received her master's in curating the art museum from the Courtauld Institute of Art in London, and a bachelor in art history and Jewish studies from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Now I will hand this over to Elizabeth Shoshany Anderson.
Thank you so much, Charlotte, for that introduction. Thank you everyone for attending this event. I'm delighted to introduce artist Patrick Martinez for tonight's talk. Patrick Martinez maintains a diverse practice that includes mixed media, landscape paintings, neon sign works, cake paintings, and his Peachy folder series. Patrick Martinez, born in 1980 in Pasadena, California, earned his BFA with honors from Art Center College of Design in 2005. His work has been exhibited domestically and internationally in Los Angeles, Mexico City, San Francisco, Minneapolis, Miami, New York, Seoul, and the Netherlands, at venues including the Studio Museum in Harlem, the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery, the Tucson Museum of Art, the Albright Knox Art Gallery, the Cornell Fine Arts Museum, the Vincent Price Art Museum, and the Museum of Latin American Art, among others. Patrick's work resides in the permanent collections of Los Angeles County Museum of Art, the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture, and the Museum of Latin American Art, among others. Patrick lives and works in Los Angeles and is represented by Charlie James Gallery in Los Angeles. We will first hear an artist talk by Patrick, followed by a live Q&A. If you have questions for Patrick at any time, please feel free to put them in the comment box and I'll pass them on. Patrick, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, I guess I could just start with the presentation that I have. I'll just share my screen. How I usually start these kind of presentations is I'll start talking about the surrounding like photos that I kind of informed by, but it's just to kind of communicate what I'm inspired by. So I take a lot of photos or find a lot of things that I around the city that I kind of take photos of and or just kind of copy and paste from. Share my screen here. So in Los Angeles, I've been here all my life. I've never lived anywhere else. I grew up in the San Gabriel Valley. I've been in Los Angeles, different pockets of LA my whole life. I kind of let the land inform the work. In another way, like I say it, is that the land provides the visual, the content, just the objects and the materials to create some of the work. I opened up the scope to America and just different parts of America, in some of the work that I'm doing. I work in different mediums. I have different bodies of work, but to me, they're all kind of inspired or connected through a common thread. This here is downtown Los Angeles. It's called the Flower District, and different areas in the city. People from different parts of the city come here to purchase bulk flowers, or if a loved one passed away, or there's a funeral or anything like that, you'll come here to buy the city to buy the flowers. but noticing and just paying attention to just different parts of the city. What I was attracted to here was not only just the arrangements that one puts together for a funeral, but how they are advertising them on the stucco wall. This is kind of the idea that I had for using the roses that I make out of ceramics. I hand make each one of them. I adhere them to the wall as forms of indications of trauma and hurt, street memorials, things like that. And then at the top of the photo with the flower arrangements on the stucco wall, there's a banner tarp, and I use those too in some of the works that I make. The landscapes that I work on, we're speaking on kind of like arrangements, different parts of the city combined in one. Some of them are from memory, some of them are from inspiration, some of them are just kind of made up. These are the materials I'm looking to use and that I've kind of established, I guess, and the colors, just everything about, just kind of like looking for different cues or different opportunities to use already existing materials in the city to create something. So I'm using, I'm interested here in just like the stucco walls, but then also just like, the vocabulary, the colors of like, the palm trees and how one represents or advertises their restaurant, even like religious kind of spaces and how they use tile different ways. And I'm also interested in like the additions like the community has, like if someone tags or does graffiti on top of these places, what do they do to eradicate or to get rid of it? They'll use a color that they think that matches or is similar, and they'll paint it out. My background is that I come from graffiti. I started painting at 12 years old. That was in 1992. And I for sure knew that I was drawing at the time with pencils, pens, markers. But before I started painting on panel or canvas, I started painting on walls, wall surfaces with spray paint. And the way that I use, or the way spray paint has informed my work is that I look to things to use that you're not supposed to, like spray paint is something that you bought at the hardware store and you weren't supposed to make art with it. So I'm kind of always investigating what you're not supposed to use, or just like things that are kind of not thought of as art making kind of mediums. So in my work, I use tile and some of this, the walls texture. This is another example of a banner tarp that I use. I'm thinking about the changing landscape also, so I'm adding these banner tarps. It speaks on, they kind of speak on like the renting and selling of land. I think about like traditional canvas that's kind of stretched on panel that's stuck together with rabbit skin glue, that is, oil painters would paint on. I think of different tarps and textures as canvas, or wanting to stretch them for graphic elements or color. Even just kind of having, like this one I used in one of a painting back in 2018 or 17, and I used a lot of the already existing tags on there. I didn't paint it out or anything like that. This is kind of an example of where I'm pulling from in terms of the neon vocabulary. What I like about these is just kind of the examples of not just like the, how, like words are communicated or a service is communicated, but the vocabulary that's already built in our city. This is in Los Angeles, but I think a lot of people can kind of relate to this around, across America. It's just kind of, if it's a shoe repair place, you'll see like a high heel red shoe or some kind of like boot that says repair. We understand it as like, shoe repair, keys with like either a lock or actual key, or, Thai food, El Salvadorian food here in LA. They'll have like a palm tree to represent, or, kind of indicate that it's like tropical or something. So I'm using these kind of visual cues in some of the work that I'm doing now with like the neon already existing kind of language. These are two photos that I took in East LA, barber shop on Whittier Boulevard on the right, with the pink and I just like the arrangement of colors, a flower shop right down the street with the banner tarps advertising. I'm interested in that community aesthetic, that advertising that has to do with just the community and not just like this giant kind of machine of advertising and like what we're used to seeing on television, but like, something that is more community based and just really just trying to get the idea across. There's another example of flowers in kind of that hard and soft stucco wall with like that soft, like, flower bouquet on top. It's kind of inspiration for some of the landscape pieces. Again, here, neon signage in the city, banner tarp in Cypress Park by my home. I like the fact that this inflatable had like palm trees in it. I actually used it as part of a piece that I had at Studio Museum. I used those two palm trees as, palm trees I would use in like thinking about it in the landscape. This is an El Sereno. I like how I use security bars in a lot of my pieces, thinking about them as sculptural, but I like how they divvy up their space, or there's a line of two different colors to define the two businesses. This is by my friend's home in Boyle Heights, which is not there anymore, and I enjoyed like the painting, the hand painted advertising of cakes. Also just, how people in the community or people who live around there tag on it and how it's painted out. You can see on the top cake piece, or the cake, round cake, that there was a tag there, then now it's painted out, so you can only see it inside of the painted part. Cornucopia of like fruits, vegetables with tags. This is Boyle Heights. This is in Frogtown. It's a mural that's kind of been left just to kind of like, kind of just like, a road away, I guess, in the sun. It's still there. I'm interested just kind of in the layering of it and just how it's peeling and stuff, and how it speaks to the land, and also just like the changing landscape. Who knows how long this will, stay up for. I used it in one of the pieces, or one of the paintings that I created like 2 years ago. Two close-ups of that. These are fences that kind of come up in LA. They're kind of dubbed as the gentrification fence, or a fence that a realtor or a homeowner puts on to like a new kind of like a house that they're trying to flip. It's kind of like a modern, like, to make it seem like it's kind of like wanting to beautify the home. Maybe look at like maybe like kind of like presented as like some type of modern home, but it's just really like an older home with like new paint and then this new fence. And I just always thought that it was interesting that they were always popping up as real specific. Like there were just like these fences that kind of covered up the home. And I don't know, it was like during the time of the last president speaking about walls and talking about barriers and things like that. So I just was curious to use them in my work. This is kind of an older example of like what you saw with the Flower Mart, and kind of my first kind of try at ceramics on a panel. So I'm painting with stucco and spray paint as a background, and then creating this sculpture on top that speaks to memorials and funerals and things like that. So adhering that onto the surface of the stucco. And my original kind of idea was trying to achieve like a new bas relief sculpture kind of situation where I'm trying to protrude out of the painting. That's why I started using neon, ceramics, things like that. Even the stucco feels like it's pushing out of the paint, the surface of the panel. This is the example of that banner tarp that I showed you earlier on. I did this back in 2017, I believe, as a diptych. The flower that you see painted in there is Bougainvillea. You see it all over Los Angeles. And, you know, I'm just using all of the materials here. The tile that you probably saw, the cross, that was kind of the same color. So I'm like taking bits and pieces of different parts of it, you know, the city. The tarp is actually from a space in LA. So I'm using that as like stretching that canvas on the panel. The Bougainvilleas in different parts of LA. So it's kind of it's a landscape. I'm cutting into the canvas or the tarp and putting elements of ceramic in that, and just, you know, neon. This is an earlier kind of landscape piece, thinking about the beach and the different connections to the beach. The white tiles inspired by the 110 freeway and the halls, and even the 10 freeway going to the beach. There's like these tunnels. There's just white tile in LA that go to the oceans, Venice Beach. And then, yeah, just like the ceramic roses on top with the LA body banner tarps. Another earlier piece, just layering paint. I use a pressure washer to expose different layers. So I'll paint many layers of you know, thick paint with stucco and spray paint on top of that, and paint on top of that. And like a tree that you cut down, you'll see like the rings in the stump. Yeah, that's kind of like how I approach this, is just kind of showing and exposing different times of that wall, I guess. So I'll paint on top of the surface of the wall too. On the left side, you see like the flowers painted on the surface. So I imagine it as being some type of like mural, or maybe an advertisement for a florist. And then, you know, arranging on top of that. I have this in my presentation because it's like more of a inspiration, things that I'm taking from different parts of the city, the layering of the city, the glass with the neon on top, with the scratches on top. Also, the peachy folder is just for reference for some of the work that I'm doing now. This is the peachy folder, a scholastic folder that was kind of created in the 1960s. They probably go further back than that, but this specific one, I think, was in the 50s, 60s. They have other versions that are earlier, but this was kind of representing an idealized kind of school kind of context of these kids that were playing, you know, football, tennis, track. On the back, they're playing basketball. So it's like this kind of, you know, idealized version of just like people playing sports in high school in the 1950s and 60s. So I wanted to take this and remix that, update that, subvert that. So I started drawing on top of them, but before that, I just completely remade it as a print, which I did in 2005. And then in 2008, I recreated it as a t-shirt and print. And then 2014, I believe, I started painting them from scratch. So in this, I would paint the lines in the peachy folder, and then the circle with the peachy, and then the lines on that, and create paintings of the idea of these were like, we had these in middle school and high school, and there's something we put in our back pocket with our papers and things like that. But I wanted to speak on youth and authority because I was seeing what was happening back in, early 2000s, or even when I was in high school. The police were at our high school, and I never understood that. So they would harass us and harass my brother and his friends. So I was like interested in like youth and authority, and that's kind of where it started. And it started as more as a generic version of what you're seeing here. So a cop tackling a kid, or cop chasing kids, and then we started getting video and still images of these kids that were being killed by policemen, police officers. So I started painting those images in the painting, the specific kids in their cap and gown, the situation that got caught on video. I would draw that or paint that. This is the first example of it in 2005, I believe, or 2008. It's real generic. It's just straightforward. I was seeing these things happen, but it was like, I didn't have photos of it, so I just made it up. And then this is fast forward to 2014. And we're talking about Eric Garner and Walter Scott on the top. And the first thing I noticed about the Eric Garner scene was that obviously it's horrific situation. After I started watching it more and more, is like, I noticed that the plainclothes detective had a football jersey on, and he obviously tackled Eric Garner for selling loose cigarettes or whatever, and choked him until he died. Walter Scott was shot in the back. He was running from a police officer. It was caught on video. So these images are popping up, these videos are popping up. So I'm painting them, trying to give them importance, because they were happening so fast and so many of them were just popping up. So I just started painting these scenes, and just so that when we slow down, we could remember these things. And this one specifically, this photo that you're looking at is not I believe it is the painting, but I created from the painting folders to redistribute to high schools, colleges, things like that. This is an example of my neon work that I'm doing, text-based work. All men are created equal, it says at the bottom, but it's not lit up. And I use things like that. In the city, you find some of the neons aren't working. So I use everything in the neon vocabulary that can be used, or try to. And I think that for me, that's like a redaction of text. That's a way of using it. It's kind of like thinking about just taking black paint and blacking something out. But in the neon context, there's only limited things that you can do. There's limited colors, the shapes you have to communicate. It's either text or some kind of like icon. So I'm just trying to find new ways of doing things or communicating things in this context or body of work. This is a folder I was telling you about. I printed them and I started distributing them back to high school students as prints. And it's important for me to bridge my work from the gallery, or bridge my work that I'm doing in the gallery to people that are just not interested in the gallery per se, or maybe scared to come to a gallery or whatever. I don't think that, specifically youth is important to me. It informs my work, but I don't think that they're really kind of checking out the newest shows that are happening, in galleries or museums. So I try to build bridges and get pieces of art to them. This is in Inglewood, California. We went to a high school that was there, and we handed out folders. This is in the Bronx in New York. High school kids just getting out of school. This is in Orlando. This is what they look like up close. Different colors. I do different colors and things like that. Different paintings. This is one I did for the 92 uprisings. UCLA wanted to do some. I thought it was great because it's something that we, it's subverted, and it's just I feel like they're asking me to do what I would have done for free, or just kind of like, infiltrated some way. So I feel like, this is, one of those things where it's for sure you do it. And you can see these tabs on the bottom of the folder. That is information about the uprising, and then also about me or whatever. But that gave me the idea to start putting information inside the folders about how to de-escalate for youth, how to de-escalate, you know, interactions, hostile interactions with police officers. UCLA. This is a piece I painted 2017. This one is at the Smithsonian. I'm using collage here. Jordan Edwards, around Jordan Edwards, you know, shoulders and different parts of it. I'm, in terms of the collage, I'm thinking more like in on our Peachy folders, we used to put like stickers and stuff like that on our folders. So I'm thinking about them as giant stickers and, you know, using them in the painting. This was at Occidental College. Paulo O'Neill. This is Paulo O'Neill's sister on Instagram. So, you know, I haven't gotten any like you know, the emails and the messages, they're not crazy. They're always kind of positive, especially from family members. I've had family members come visit me from out of town and wanting to see their paint. You know, I had a father come visit me he's from Texas, and he came to visit when he was in town to see the painting I did of his son that was, you know, shot by an off-duty cop. He was only 17 years old. So that kind of happens too as a byproduct of painting these people into importance. So I just wanted to share that. And this person here, this was a scene, I think, in Florida at the bottom, in the middle, and then that's Philando Castillo, the top. And they came from me. It's a neon that I did early on, 2016, speaking on past president, all the things that were happening at that time. This is an example of that's an example of just like how the layers of the paint. And I typically work on 2 to 3 pieces at one time, and ripping through the layers of the paint and the stucco with the pressure wash, right? You think of it as a reducer or some type of, like, you know, when you put your brush into paint thinner or water and just kind of reduce the paint. So yeah, ripping through the layers and just painting on top of that. This is just an example of it. This is kind of the end product. At the bottom, you could see the layering that was ripped away. The top I kept. Another example of the neon that I'm working, well, you know, the body of work with the text, freedom cannot wait. And I typically pull from things that I'm reading or things that I feel that resonate from the past that are, you know, kind of, still relevant today. The past is the, you know, the present, that type of energy. Still life that's informed by Chinatown, Los Angeles. I think this is the first piece I made with or created with the bottom piece in tile, or the bottom of the piece in tile. This was back in 2016, I believe. I forget. 2017, I don't know, one of those. Another example of neon. Combination. This is a newer piece using the banner tarp you saw, I'm using before, but this is just stretched on top of. And I'm changing the color patterns. I'm thinking about color combinations, thinking about spaces in LA, combining them with Central Mexican murals in Cacaxla that I imagine on the sides of markets and liquor stores, that I imagine on walls of community center that have been painted out, tagged on, things like that, sold. So yeah. And Justice for All neon. This is kind of how I arrange them when there's multiples, and I think about the rhythm of the city and the kind of how I see them in the city, or how I first started seeing them back in 2008, kind of how they're arranged in a window, right? Like kind of the rhythm of the city, the uneven rhythm of like LA, the crooked and kind of uneven pavement of the sidewalk, the way that some of the neons are forced into certain spaces because it has limited space. And I like to collage them together like this. And I imagine them always kind of hanging like this and not really just kind of straightforward, like, in a line. This is a newer example of taking the neon and kind of breaking it apart. I wanted to respond to last year, and then also the materials that were showing up in the landscape. Different parts of LA had this like compressed wood on the windows. So thinking about how that would look on a storefront, and that I was painting some of the storefronts already, but thinking about different areas of LA, boarding those windows up and then ripping them apart. A lot of the news was covering the protests, George Floyd protests last summer, and they were so confused about why youth and people were breaking into, places and breaking windows, and it was always like, I would always think about this Bell Hooks quote that was, "There can be no love without justice." So that was kind of like the rebuttal, or like an explanation to that question. So here I'm using like the materials that you've been seeing that I'm using in just what I've been showing you, but then also adding that compressed wood and that Adidas shirt that's caught in the compressed wood, someone leaving from taking or stealing stuff. But yeah, that's kind of the energy on that. This is a piece that is in the collection of LACMA. This is kind of like one of the earlier landscapes that I created, and using banner tarp tile, mural that's kind of painted in the back, underneath, pressure washed, spray painted on top of. This one is, I think, one of the biggest pieces I've done. I forget how, I think it's like an 8 foot by 16 feet or something. That's the details of the piece. This is the installation of my show. My last show was 2017, Charlie James. Some more neon examples. Alice Walker. These are the cake. This is the cake kind of portraits that I'm working on. It's kind of an ongoing series. Comandante Marcos. He is a Zapatista. I wanted to communicate traditional portrait painting, but in new ways, just wanting to create these traditional kind of paintings, but just frame them different. I feel that the frosting, the color airbrush around it, even the gold plastic that I framed the piece with, these are more sculptural paintings, but they speak to old kind of portrait paintings that you might see in the in the National Portrait Gallery, or just some kind of like Caravaggio-esque, like chiaroscuro painting that's like dark background, gold frame. I wanted to, you know, kind of remix that in a community aesthetic, something that that I was familiar with, that my friends were familiar with, that everyone's really familiar with because everyone celebrates a birthday. And they're more celebratory pieces, so people that have been discounted, I feel, painting them into importance. This is James Baldwin. These are older, 2018. Cesar Chavez. This is a more recent one that I did end of last year. Fredrik Douglas, very hard man to paint. It's like 3 to 4 different portraits in one. His bone structure is incredible. I don't I don't project any of these things. I paint straight onto the panel, and I'm drawing with the paint, trying to get it right. So I put a lot of efforts into painting and finding the likeness. But yeah, Fredrik Douglas, Nipsey Hussle. I painted him in 2019 when he passed away. This is a portrait of Claudia Patricia Gomez Gonzalez that was still in on display. I don't think it's at the National Portrait Gallery now, but it's on kind of a tour for the portrait show. And she was killed at the border coming into Texas. She was from Guatemala. Yeah, so she was shot and killed by a border patrol agent. And I wanted to paint her and, give her, paint this memorial almost of a woman that wanted more. She wanted, I guess, was sold on the idea of America, just like my mother was, So I just felt a kind of a connection to her narrative. This is a piece that I did back in 2018, I believe. It shows the first kind of attempt at neon with the LED. I've been doing the security bars for a while, probably since 2013, 14, but kind of combining, what you find in the window of a storefront. And then also you could see that there's photos of, that's like my family archive, my grandfather, my mother, my father, great aunt, things like that. And they're cyan type because I wanted to show them being kissed by the sun. Like, we've been here a long time. My grandfather on my dad's side was born in 1908, and he came to New Mexico by way of by way of Chihuahua, Mexico, and long time ago. So he was here in America for a very long time. That is not it. I don't know what. There you go. It's playing. Another example of the LED with the neon. Mural samples from murals in central Mexico that are, still exist. Thinking about brown bodies on the surfaces of market stores, people, muralists painting them on the side of the stores, that being tagged on, changed up, things like that, combined with advertising on top of. More examples of. So I'm like, in that example, I'm painting like full paintings and then covering them up, spraying that out, and then painting on top of again. This is Albright Knox right now in Buffalo, New York, and this is a collage of neon. The show comes out pretty soon. It's a group exhibition out there. I like to expose the wires. I like to show them because that's how it looks in the in a market or a liquor store, and I want these neons to look like you can grab them from the museum wall or gallery wall and put them in the front liquor store kind of window. I started expanding just like the folders that I was printing from the paintings based on the paintings. I wanted during the last election cycle, I wanted to make these neon yard signs that typically are election posters that you see on people's yards, and they're just with the neon image, you know, speaking on different things. Not really advertising anything, but just more of an idea or just thoughts. Cool little photo of a little dude. Just I think that's in Ohio at the museum. I forgot what museum, Columbus Museum. Just to show scale, he's cute. Rebecca Solnit. Using, you know, taking quotes, but then using what I have in my vocabulary, visual vocabulary, to make it realer, or just not make it realer, but just in the visual, just kind of make it, or try to make it just kind of stick to the wall, or just make it so that you're getting a visual of just not something that you've read, but just something that kind of resonates. That's all I have in this presentation. I hope that's.
Thanks so much for sharing that artist talk, Patrick. And if you're just joining us, I'm here with Patrick Martinez, who is here to discuss his practice and his current exhibition on view right now at MMoCA, Signs of the Times, which will be up through May 2nd in the shop. And I guess we can get things started for the question and answer session. And reminders, if you have a question at any point, just put it in the Facebook group, the Facebook chat box. We have one question from the audience to kick things off. A viewer says, love the cake portraits. Gracias for sharing and reflecting our cultura. I like what you said about the layers. What does that process mean to you?
Definitely, that's a good question. The layering that I'm painting or taking away for me speaks on like the changing landscape. And I'm using colors that aren't necessarily colors that you see a lot anymore in the changing landscape. I feel that they're being painted out, or the changing of, you know, whoever the person that's leasing it or owning the business is kind of painting it out, or they want to represent something else, and it's not that. The way LA is laid out, I feel there's certain pockets and certain communities in those pockets, and I feel like there's a certain aesthetic that is probably leaving us. So it's my kind of way to capture it, not like photojournalism, but just more of a to sit with it, I guess, and just like spend time with that feeling of what that place might have felt like. So in that, I want to show layers of what was once there, like how long it was there, you know, and that's what I was thinking about, like, you know, showing like the rings of a tree, like how long it's been there, or how long has, you know, what businesses were there before, or what was once there, florist, a market, liquor store, a community center that had a certain mural on it that's now painted out. Those are my ideas, and that's what I'm kind of taking from it. It's kind of an ongoing process of when I'm painting these things. Some of them are sketched out, some of them are just, I go for it, and they reveal themselves to me as I go on making it. So what the piece is about specifically is about my, you know, it's all different at times. It's more about the experience that I'm having at the time, or what I'm kind of prompted by when I see it in the, you know, in LA. And then it's more that I'm reacting to certain places certain areas, certain things that were there that aren't there anymore. So it's a lot of all that. It's a lot of layers, but specifically, I feel that it's about the changing landscape and then showing that what was once there before it leaves.
Yeah, and this kind of goes into another question that I have for you, Patrick. Your art, as you've covered in your talk, in so many ways is kind of centered on Los Angeles, but I'm curious to know how you think it kind of speaks to a broader range of other urban experiences, or how you think viewers in other locales who might not be familiar with the LA aesthetic or the LA experience might kind of encounter your work. For instance, obviously we're showing your work in Madison, Wisconsin, but it still kind of retains that urban feel to the work and certain elements of that.
Yeah, I think that it's familiar to a lot of people. I think it's a community aesthetic, especially with the neon stuff. It's not anything that deals with like it's not an aesthetic that, well, maybe advertising uses it now, but you know, that's not something that we see in magazines or whatever. It's just more straight to the point. You know, it's in a, like I showed you in the presentation, like you know, like shoe repair, locksmith or keys or income tax or laundromat. So I think people have experienced those that type of signage, and they kind of connect with it in that way, in some way. I mean, like in different parts of LA, it's riddled with a lot of this neon. Some areas it's just kind of miles. In some areas it's just one or two or three. I think you could see it all over America in different, you know, amounts. Some of it's thick and saturated. Some of it is just like one or two, but I think they connect with it in a way. And I guess the way I approach making the landscapes too, and the way people connect to it is either they're familiar with the materials that I'm using, or maybe the visuals or what I'm representing in the landscape. But I approach it just as a landscape painter almost, you know, and it's an experience that, you know, like I want people to, that don't even live in a city or, you know, can kind of experience it. I want them to look at it like they're looking at a, I don't know, like an ocean paint, you know, like a painting of the ocean, but not like that, but just more in a technical way, like looking at it, but just like observing that, you know, like they're kind of digesting what I'm observing, if that makes sense. And it's not, I guess like that's how when I was younger, I looked at landscapes like that. Like, what was this guy looking at, or what was this woman looking at? And it was about the craft. It was about a lot of things, but then also like, what are they looking at? Where they live? Why are they painting this? Why are the colors like, you know? So if nothing else, they can appreciate for that kind of, you know, that kind of sensibility, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I've got another question from a viewer. I am struck by and love the range of emotions from nostalgia and honor in your cakes, and provocation / critique in your neons, and a mix of suffering and honor in the peachy works. I see intimate from to school to nation. Can you say how peachies or cakes came to your mind?
Yeah, so like peachy folders, because me and my brother we had them in middle school and not elementary, but high school. And we used to draw on them, and friends would draw on them, fold them up, put our homework in them, throw in our backpacks or back pockets. So that was, you know, language. I don't really, when I'm experiencing art, I love it, you know, to see different touches, right? Like people executing things and looking at different things and being inspired by different things. When I am inspired by something, it's more kind of an outer experience, like things that I'm observing more than like being inspired by another artist, if that makes sense. It's like, so I use my experience. I try to use what's close to me in my experience or in my past, because there's a personal experience there, and it makes it realer for me, right? Like there's more of a, not an attachment, but just more of a connection, and I could springboard off of that. So that experience of having that as a kid makes it personal. So that was why the PG folders were easy, an easy visual or product to kind of subvert. And, you know, I don't even know if like America's really familiar with it. I think a lot of America is, you could see in popular culture, Saved by the Bell, you know, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, all the kids had peachy folders, but some people don't know what they are, especially overseas. And I like that, I guess, meaning that it's specifically American. And I don't know, I think that we have these problems, there's these problems all over the world, but for me, all I can do is to speak on the experience of the American problem we have now with police and police murders now and police misconduct and youth and authority. So it was a kind of the perfect canvas for that for me. It just took time to develop. The cakes was like more of thinking about photos on printed photos that are edible and put onto these sheet cakes. So they were more of community, celebratory kind of thought, you know, behind it. And it was thinking about like, you know, the portraits of people when they were young, they would print them out, put them on the cake, things like that, so they could remember. That was kind of my approach to it. And but the paint application was inspired by different ways I can manipulate paint, as thick sculpture, as thick paint, putting the paint into frosters and frosting the paint on there. I was thinking about Wayne Thiebaud and his paintings of how he's like, you know, almost like getting thick amounts of oil paint and using them. I mean, I could see his drawing, right, in his paint, like how he's applying it, you know. So I'm thinking about ways, different ways to apply paint in those pieces also.
So the three works that are in the exhibition at MMoCA all kind of take protest movements or protest slogans in some way as their central theme. You know, you have Hold the Ice, which says agua is life, no ice. And then a quote from Henry David Thoreau in one of them, another piece that addresses some graffiti from the 1992 LA uprisings. And I'm just kind of wondering if you can talk a little bit more about how this exhibition came to have that central theme of protest in each of the works.
Sure. Sorry, I'm getting a call. Yeah, so like the ice piece, I would say that what prompted that was a combination of obviously the language, you know, of the Dakota Access Pipeline and being there at the, you know, I went with some, you know, a group of my friends there to protest back in 2016. I think it was at 2015 or 16, and that language was the protest language. Combining that with things that I found in LA, neons that you would find with the plastic container to do refills of water. Combine that with signage that you find at liquor stores selling ice. You would see the protest language of no ice all over LA. You can still see it on freeways. You could still, you know, have it, people making posters and putting them up on trees. You see it everywhere. So it's combining all of that, finding intersections. I think that the neons are all intersections. The way I hang them, the way I hang them next to each other, they might seem at first like they're separate ideas, but they all have intersections, and they all have to do with each other, like they're connections. Even the 92 uprising, you know, Look What You Created, that was inspired by a photo that, you know, Kirk McCoy from Los Angeles Times, he took that photo, and it was of this burning business that was tagged first, I think, and then burned. And so Look What You Created was like kind of like the rage or that protest language, you know. It was, I was 12 years old. I was watching it unfold on television, and different parts of my area were burning as well. And it was it's taking all of that experience. It all has to do with each other, right? It's about you know, supremacy, suppression, finding, you know, when I started doing all this stuff, I just, you know, I thought I was speaking on, you know, early on, I thought I was speaking on separate topics, but they all kind of connected. And I wanted to, especially with these three, the grouping is definitely connected, and the past being the present. Henry, you know, Thoreau, the Thoreau quote, you could see it right here. It's, you know, the past speaking in the present, you know, just, you know, civil disobedience. We have a right. I mean, we have a obligation to speak up. And it's weird. These neons started out as sculptural pieces. The language was playful. Then it became like poetry. I started taking rap lyrics, putting them in, and then I think it was like the people were hard up for money. I was speaking about money, and then it quickly turned into this protest language because of the current, during that time, the current presidency. And then they became, you know, digital because they fit in the Instagram kind of square, rectangle, whatever. And people digitize, well, I digitized them, and people took that and used them, I think, as new way. Like for me, they're like protest signs in a digital kind of space. They're not out there, especially during the pandemic last year. They're not out there with, you know, which is, you know, within reason. Like, you know, they don't want to be out there so that they'll post something in support of, you know, whatever they feel is right. Maybe I'll post something about, you know, or then they came for me, then they'll repost that with whatever they want to say as a you know, body of text in their post. So they in a way organically became a digital protest sign.
We have another question from a viewer. Thank you for honoring those individuals that have had their lives taken by so-called authority figures. I really appreciate that you are a bridge and that you take your art to students. Please tell us more about how you feel when you give students the folders. What do you hope they will take away from your artwork?
I don't know how I feel. I mean, like, I give them out. They feel kind of, it's funny talking to high school kids because, you know, you give them this stuff, you want to give them a print, or, you know, like you go up to them and then you're like, there's this weird kind of like energy because they don't know who you are. What are you doing here? I don't want to buy your mixtape, whatever, right? Like, they're just like, can you leave me alone? And there's like this negotiation of like me trying to have to explain, and I don't want to get into some type of scholarly talk and explain it to them like in a complicated way. I just want to say, hey, like, I want to give you this print or whatever. It's how I sell it to them is that it's a folder and they can put their papers in it. So then they put it in there and then they throw it in their back. And later on, you know, I think their parents understand what it is because they have that like context. They had that as a kid. They appreciate it, I guess, as a functional thing first, and then they really kind of, it resonates with them sometimes, you know, it will hit them later. I guess I feel pretty good about just giving them art. And that's kind of like one of how I look at it. And just something that, because for me, that's almost performative in a way, and I appreciate them actually hearing me out and taking it and ending up with a print and hopefully being interested in what I'm not doing. I mean, not what I'm doing specifically, but just in art in general. And knowing that artists are there to represent and try to reach out and bridge them, and or, you know, thinking about them even, and we're just not out here just thinking about ourselves and, you know, trying to show in galleries and music. It's you know, especially now, I think we're thinking about them, the youth, a lot, and I think that that's a good thing. I mean, like, I feel good about that and just giving them prints, limited. I mean, they're limited, and whatever I print at the time is there, and I'll do something else later. So I enjoy it. I think it's almost a performative act, and I think it hopefully resonates with them, and that's what I'm into.
Yeah, well, we're coming up on the end of our time here, so I have one sort of final question for you, and it relates back to those PT folders, which, one of them in your series of those works features a commemorative portrait of George Floyd, and I just kind of wanted to bring it up given the momentous occasion of Derek Chauvin being convicted of killing Mr. Floyd just this past week on April 20th. I wonder if you have any reflections or thoughts in relation to this series upon that occasion, or your other works as an artist, as an activist, and just, if you have anything else to share.
I was happy on Tuesday for sure. But the ongoing, like, I don't want to continue this series, like I don't want to, like, it's frustrating hearing all the stories that pop up, even though that this is and I believe in honoring a win, and knowing that it's going to take a long time to, change the conversation, change the narrative. It's a bigger conversation. It's like carving rock in canyons with drops of water, right? But they all kind of make a difference. We just got to keep on, like, make that happen. With the drops of water, every kind of like win counts, and that's a huge win. And from when I started back painting these, these people, they're kind of cementing what happened with these young folks and these people that have had interactions with the police. And then even like taking it back to me being 12 years old in the uprising in '92 at LA, it's not like the full answer, but there's like kind of like a little bit of adjustment. There's like in the right direction, I hope, and hopefully that shows up. I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to continue to do this series. I would like to stop hearing about these narratives and watching these videos of, people being killed by authority figures. I have, a family member that's a police officer, and I used to change his diapers, and, like all this, and I think about him. I think about a lot of things. I think about how a lot of these police officers aren't trained well, and so it's a lot of things I think about. I know that it's an ongoing thing. We have to keep on pushing for these police officers to be, in their own benefit too. They should be trained right so that they respond correctly. So it's a win that I honor, and I was really happy, and a lot of my friends were happy. But also we know that I guess it's like one of those things where it's like an ongoing thing. It's going to take some time, and I don't know. I think about all the work and the paintings that I've made, and I would like to not, in my lifetime, to not continue to do that work, even though, there's people telling me to continue to do it and continue to make it because it's important to them. So it was a great kind of celebratory day, but like, I guess people that have been in, like, I guess like the best part, it's weird to celebrate when these people that I'm painting shouldn't be painted, and it's like the celebration would be if they were still alive, it's like it's sad that we have to celebrate stuff like this when it should be already, 2021, and it should be already known that, like, life is precious, and you shouldn't just do a lot of things, shoot people, like when you pull up to a scene or choke someone out. It's heartbreaking.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, and thank you so much for participating in this artist talk. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks as well to Charlotte Cummins, our Director of Education and Programs, and for Simone Doing for doing the technical coordination. And as a reminder to anyone watching, Patrick Martinez, Signs of the Times is on view through May 2nd in the shop, also visible from the window from State Street. So come down to the museum and take a look if you've got the chance, or check out our website for more information. Patrick, thank you so much again for sharing so much about your work with us.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks for having me.